on the offensive side of the ball. So
you saw steps in the right direction. In Game 1 against Old Dominion, Lenore Sellers looked like a first-time starting quarterback.
Oh, yeah.
Shaky, was missing throws, overthrowing, underthrowing, wasn't going through his reads, wasn't keeping his eyes downfield. You saw steps in the right direction with that. And you saw, I think, a trust from Dow Loggins, the offensive coordinator, more in Sellers because they didn't keep running him. Like, he ran 22 design plays the week before, which, again, that's a lot, even for a quarterback of his skill set. They trust him a little bit more to sit back in the pocket, keep his eyes downfield, let things progress, and you saw him start to find a little bit more rapport with his receivers, which, again, is a step in the right direction. It's still not perfect. It's still far from perfect, but you saw the improvement in areas you wanted to see improvement in.
Yeah, and I think a big part of it was also he was making smart plays. You know, he wasn't looking down the field trying to huck 30, 40-yard darts to, you know, his receiver core, but he was kind of utilizing, you know, like you said, kind of his pocket spacing. And I thought he capitalized the most on kind of the screen pass opportunity. As you saw, most of the scores were within, I think, 25 yards. Mm-hmm. So it was nice to see him kind of utilize the spacing in the pocket to kind of let his guys kind of, you know, utilize the offensive kind of get it going on the ground.
And I think, because we know Sellers has a really big arm, and we've seen that on display last year a couple times. We saw that in game number 1 where he chucked a deep ball to Jared Brown. He just ended up dropping it. I think when you develop more of that trust with your receivers and obviously have more time in the pocket because the pass blocking is still a work in progress as well. When you develop that rapport with your receivers, that's when you feel comfortable. And Dow Loggins, you know, calling plays will feel more comfortable with that feel like stretching the field a little bit more. So, again, on Saturday, kept things a little bit more contained. And, yes, you let your athleticism, your receivers like Mazio Bennett and guys like that take over to add more yards to the plays. But the throws themselves are relatively safe for the most part.
Right, and I think going back to what you were saying about the line, I think this weekend's going to be that first really big test to see what, in terms of how they mesh, what's going to work and what's not going to work. Because like we were just talking about, you know, Sellers is very mobile. You know, he's going to really, really utilize the space he has available in the pocket. But LSU is a very competitive in-conference team. Kentucky, I would not say nearly as much. And
Sure.
Old Dominion, you know, they got a solid defense, but I don't really think they're holding a candle to the level of a team or a program that LSU is. So I think this is really going to be the first test to see kind of how that line kind of meshes against, you know, real top conference talent.
And that's why I like the way that South Carolina's schedule kind of worked out this year, particularly in the first month, because it is a slow ramp up. Again, you have an Old Dominion team that you probably should have beaten by more than you did, but you got walked away with the win, and that's the most important thing. You were 1-0 come away from that game, but a lesser opponent that you were able to beat. Then you step up with a conference opponent, which, you know, good or bad, an SEC team's an SEC team. And yes, you made them look a whole lot worse than people thought they were going to, but still step up in competition from what you had in week number 1. They're NFL caliber guys on both sides of the ball when it comes to Kentucky, and you went out there and handled your business, won by 25 points. Now you take another step in the competition level against LSU. Are they the best team in the SEC? No. Is there a lot of NFL talent on that team? Absolutely. And again, what you see from this team this weekend then sets the table for what you're going to see in October, because you're going to play Ole Miss, you're going to play Alabama, you're going to play Oklahoma, you're going to have a murderer's row type of schedule. Now, again, what we've seen out of those teams in the first 2 weeks maybe changes your opinion on that a little bit, but still, that's 3 toughest games you have on the schedule as of right now. And then you play the Missouris, you play the A&Ms, you play the Clemsons in the last month of the season. So you get a good litmus test in the month of September for just how good South Carolina is. And then you get Akron on the back end of it where, again, they're worse than Old Dominion. You should be able to handle your business against them before you go into that tough month of October.
Mm-hmm. And I know, staying on the subject of schedule strength, I know we're talking, you know, this game against LSU is a big, huge game, yada, yada. Even if they lose this game, you know, they drop one, they can really bounce back against Akron and still have good momentum going into this gauntlet that is Ole Miss, Alabama, Oklahoma. So I think depending on how this game goes, it's not the end all if they don't come up with the win. If it's close, I think regardless, that's still a huge win in itself, even
Sure.
if it is a close game. If they win, obviously, you know, that's best case scenario. But
Yeah.
if they lose, I don't think it's the end all.
It's not. You just want to look good this weekend. And yes, we all want to see them win. We all see them go 3-0, especially with the eyes of college football on you. But if this game was, I don't want to say you give up this many points, but let's say it was like a 35-38 game and you lost on last-second field goal. Yeah, losing sucks, but you'd still come away from that game feeling pretty good about what you have, especially offensively. If you're able to, go toe-to-toe with them like that. Again, defensively, that doesn't sound great if you're giving up that many points, but still, you walk away from it knowing, okay, we went toe-to-toe with a much better team in the SEC that, again, we've talked about this team going into the season hoping to get to 6 wins, to at least get back to a bowl game, because that's better than you did a season ago. And if you beat Old Dominion, you dismantle Kentucky, and you lost a close game to LSU, I'd still feel like most people are feeling pretty good about this team as we close out the month of September with Akron next weekend.
And then back to your point with, College game day, national eyes being on Williams-Brice this weekend, what that's going to do for this program, win or lose, if the game's close, the entire college football landscape is going to remember, oh, South Carolina is that team that we weren't necessarily looking at, or, maybe going into this season, we were looking at them as a 6 or 7 win team. Now we're thinking, maybe they're going to be that 10 win team. So
it's a chance to make a statement.
Absolutely.
Because the last time most people were really paying attention to South Carolina was 2 years ago. They beat Clemson. They beat Tennessee in consecutive weeks. Or flip that. They beat Tennessee, then Clemson in consecutive weeks and ended their playoff chances. And everybody's talking about, man, what's happening down there in South Carolina? You got a lot of attention on you going into last season. You didn't look good in week 1 against North Carolina, and then the season kind of unraveled from there to where I think most people looked at that and said, okay, those 2 wins, that was flash in the pan. Carolina's just kind of a 500 team, whatever, they're on to the next thing. But if you can go out there and beat LSU this weekend and have the eyes of college football upon you, great. Well, it's going to be a great atmosphere. I know the weather's not looking great as of right now, which hopefully the storms move past and we have decent weather for this game and for college game day. But if you can make a statement this weekend, you can, I don't want to say turn the narrative nationally about you, but you can get a lot more people saying, maybe we overlooked this South Carolina program.
I just think it's funny because first tailgating weekend, I'm doing a package and I'm talking with people, they got smokers, they got grills, the whole nine. And one guy says to me, I hope we just win 6 or 7 games this year. I just hope we win 6 or 7 games. And now I think it's ironic because I would love to know what that guy is thinking, going into this weekend. I mean, if South Carolina comes out and they, everything kind of plays out the way it should, I'm just picturing Pat McAfee on Gamecock Row making the most outlandish comments and it just being all over Twitter, all over Facebook. And that's only going to, drive positive feedback towards, this entire program.
I'd be willing to bet if you ask that same guy again, he'd probably say the same thing. And here's why. Because Carolina's been in these kind of positions before. After winning a big game, having a letdown the next week. We were talking about this a little bit earlier. When they beat Alabama in 2010, number 1 Alabama, they lost to Kentucky the next week. These people have seen, okay, let's not get our hopes too high because there's always that inevitable letdown that may come after that. You hope that doesn't happen, obviously, but I think these people have seen that movie too many times before. I don't think you're going to be looking at a lot of people within this fan base. Realistically, they're saying, well, yeah, last week I thought they were going to win maybe 5 games, and now I think they're going to win 10. I think they're managing their expectations. And again, if you keep on winning, if you found a way to beat Ole Miss in a couple weeks, if you found a way to, even if you don't beat Alabama, look competitive against them, I think then the narrative would start to change. But at this point, I think people are going to continue to hold off on being too bold with their predictions and their thoughts because, again, they've seen this movie before.
Yeah, I think that's why they need the approach for now, or at least for the rest of the regular season, should just be approach every game like Old Dominion. Because I know at least going into that game, the impression was go into this hoping that we're going to win. But, if it's super close, don't get on a high horse.
Listen, the old coaching cliche of going 1-0 every week, I think applies perfectly this season because it feels like every week it's going to be a different set of emotions, both going into and coming away from the game. So it's like, let's not look too far ahead. You got LSU this week. Focus on the task at hand. Handle that, and then we'll see how we feel come Monday.
I just think the best notes that could be taken are from Cowboy fans and Knicks fans. Don't get your hopes up. when it starts to look too good too early, because there is always time to crush the fan base's hopes and dreams, unfortunately.
Well, hopefully we're feeling good coming next Monday and rolling on Tacker the next week, which, by the way, yesterday got announced as a 7:30 kickoff to be broadcast on ESPNU coming up next Saturday. We'll hear from Shane Beamer later on today, by the way, for his usual Tuesday press conference at 1 o'clock, which you'll be able to listen to on the halftime show with myself and Terry Ford. We'll transition into some broader things going on in college football. The Dion Sanders saga at Colorado continues to get interesting. Another layer added to it this weekend with some not so flattering talk about the offensive line. Hit that coming up next. It is The Extra Point. He is Sam Shapiro from WIS. Tyler Head on your Tuesday on the Game. Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head, Sam Shapiro from WIS, along with you on your Tuesday here on the game. Let's venture out to Colorado, as the Dion saga is one that is always a provider of content and information. And this past weekend, they got beaten pretty soundly by Nebraska out there in Nebraska. And the wheels feel like they're slowly starting to come off when it comes to Dion out there at Colorado. Dave, if we can we go back to yesterday's cut list here? Find cut number 31. This is Shedeur Sanders, who after Saturday's game, getting sacked a bunch of times, as is kind of the standard for Shedeur Sanders, was not mincing words when it came to the poor performance of his offensive line. Here's what he had to say.
I mean, how many times did Rowley get touched?
You said what?
How many times did Rowley get touched? They was able, like, of course, whenever you're able to run the ball consistently and whenever you're able to, then that opens up the pass, you know? But it's just like you got to understand, like, what your team good at. So it's like, why would we keep running the ball if, okay, we out there and we get in a situation where it's a must get and we don't get it?
So Shedeur, 23 of 38, 244 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Colorado lost 28-10, but he sacked 6 times. There was no quarterback in college football last year sacked more times than Shedeur Sanders. And here's the thing. He's not wrong. His offensive line is not good. It was not good a year ago. It's not good once again this year. But as a quarterback, I don't care who you are, you do not throw your offensive line under the bus. You take accountability. However you can spin it, you say, I got to do this better, I got to do that better, because those guys blocking for you, I wouldn't want to make them mad.
Yeah, they're the ones like you kind of just said, they're the ones protecting you. So you kind of, I would not be barking up that tree if I was relying on those guys for pass protection.
Because if they already were this bad, if they suddenly stop caring and just start letting guys through, which they're not going to admit to doing that, but maybe their effort goes from 100% to like 80% on a block, and he got sacked again. Whoops, my bad. You know what I mean? Like you're kind of opening the door here to things maybe getting worse.
Well, if the effort is already at 100% and this is what the blocking's like, imagine what the blocking is like at 80%. That sounds like a recipe for disaster if we already don't have one.
Well, and this is kind of a microcosm for Dion Sanders' tenure at Colorado, because when he gets there, he goes in, he basically fired the whole team that was there, went out in the transfer portal, brought in like 60 guys, and thought they were going to be successful at that. They weren't last year. Offensive line was terrible. So what does he do? He goes out there, he gets an entirely new offensive line in the offseason, which, again, a lot of good caliber talent. But think about an offensive line. You can't just throw a bunch of guys together and hope they're going to be successful. You have to have cohesion. You have to have the right guys working together to be successful. And again, we're seeing 2 games into the season. It's still a problem when it comes to blocking.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the biggest problem with Dion is, you know, when you're one of the most renowned players the game has ever seen, you kind of develop an ego that kind of, I don't know. I think his ego's a little too big for his britches in this regard, just because, like you kind of just mentioned, you kind of can't really just come into something brand new, tear it all down, bring in what you think's going to work, and then just expect it to be 10 times better initially than what it was. I mean, if you have the resume and the experience, sure. And that's not to say he doesn't have a coaching resume. You know, what he did at Jackson State was phenomenal. But
sure.
And he did bring Travis Hunter to that program as well. However, that's not the entire program as a whole. That's just kind of a piece to the puzzle, and it still seems like they kind of need a few more pieces if they want to get to, you know, that high caliber team that he kind of talks up Colorado to be.
Let's hit cut number 9 from today's list here, Dave. This is Dion after Saturday night's game out there at Nebraska on his take of the offensive struggles they're having.
I have no idea. We would have known that answer. I think we would have responded quicker. Yeah, we seemed like we just never got it going until it was too late. It seemed like we just never got it going. Protections were a problem. I'm trying to be polite and say it because, if I can say the same thing you're thinking, but if I say it, you say I'm throwing my guys up under the bus. I'm not doing that whatsoever. Protection were a problem. We got to figure out a way to prevent that and do a better job with that.
I said this a year ago. When he took over Colorado, they were expected to win 2 games. They won 4. I think you have to give Dion Sanders credit for that because they exceeded expectations. Yes, it completely went off the rails in the second half of the season, and they ended up embarrassing themselves in some games. But still, they did better than people thought they were going to, and that is something you have to give them credit for. But you can see this is heading in the wrong direction because, and Dion's been, honest about, he's not in on high school recruiting. He's not going and sitting down in these kids' living rooms. Like, yes, the initial shine of Dion Sanders being your head coach attracts a lot of attention. They were the talk of college football for the first 4 weeks of the season last year until people started to see, they're actually not very good. And yes, you can attract some high-level talent that wants to play for the brand that is Dion Sanders, but it comes to a point, and I saw a video of Travis Hunter during the game on Saturday where he just looked visibly frustrated because this dude is busting his butt. He is a high-caliber talent that's going to be playing in the NFL, just like Shedeur Sanders is. They're playing on a losing team. And, yes, playing for Dion and Coach Prime, that's cool, but these kids also want to win. And these kids also want to go to places where they can be developed to be able to go to the next level. Again, Travis Hunter, we knew before he got to Colorado, he was an NFL caliber guy. Same thing with Shedeur Sanders. Being in Colorado has not helped their cause at all into going to the next level. And eventually kids are going to see that and say, yeah, Dion's cool, but I also want to go to a place where I know I can win and have a shot at playing at the next level because it's not Colorado.
Yeah, and I think, kind of what I was saying before, kind of coming in and tearing everything down and then rebuilding everything back from the ground up kind of has not really worked to their advantage at this point because now I think it's just going to be a slow rebuild until either, he gets his footing in that role, 4 or 5 years down the line, if he gets 4 or 5 years down the line.
I'd be willing to bet Dion Sanders is not the head coach at Colorado this time next year.
Yeah, I would not be surprised either. I mean, they were comparing Shedeur to Nebraska's quarterback, and it was just like you put the two of them on the field at the same time, and it was like it was almost laughable that they were even compared the week before.
Well, and again, Shedeur, very talented, and I think has the ability to play at the next level. Probably can be drafted pretty high. But when you don't put pieces around him to be successful outside of Travis Hunter, he's only going to go so far. And a great quarterback can only carry a bad team so far. And if he was playing at Ohio State, I think he'd be in the conversation for the Heisman Trophy probably. But he's not. He's at Colorado, and there's good, talented guys on the team, but the whole unit, it just doesn't work.
I just think the whole, to the unit aspect, I just think the ego of the Sanders is holding that program back from what they could really be, just because, like you're saying, very talented, ton of experience to the game, artists of the craft, if you may. But, I really think the ego is what is holding that team back, and really from kind of, like you were kind of back to your point about, recruiting high school, kind of being more open-minded to kind of what's out there, what could help this program, looking at what Dion might consider as unorthodox routes and, getting those pieces and getting that talent towards this team so that they win more than 4 games. I mean, it's kind of insane because 2 years ago when he came there, this is the second year in a row we've been hyping them up.
Sure. And again, he brings a lot of attention because he's Dion Sanders and he's got the ego and he's very loud and always talking things up. And again, at some point you have to produce. And if people look at you and say, well, yeah, it's cool that you're there, but you're not winning, then people are going to stop caring. You can already see that in the level of attention from last year when, again, they won a couple games early in the season and they were the buzz of college football, to now it's already started to lapse a little bit. And I think it's going to continue to go farther and farther down. And again, when his sons are gone at the end of this year, because Shiloh's been around college football for 47 years, Shedeur is going to go to the NFL. What reason is connecting him to Colorado anymore past that? Nothing.
I think a good start would be if they're looking for, on top of rebuilding that line, I think they should either look for a new cornerback or wide receiver so Travis Hunter doesn't have to play both.
Well, and Travis Hunter's going to go to the NFL too, so he's going to be gone as well. So
Right.
all the pieces that tied him to Colorado aren't going to be there anymore. And again, he's going to try and rebuild in the offseason in the transfer portal. That's been successful 0 times out of 2 so far. So I just don't see it lasting. It's an interesting story to follow, and it gives us content to talk about, but this is not going in the right direction.
I would argue they're probably the most exciting bad college football team to follow right now, and they might be next year too.
It'll be an entertaining dumpster fire if it continues. I'll say that much.
Well, we're going on year 2 of it now.
Yeah, Dion, nevertheless, is always in the headlines for good and bad reasons. NFL season got kicked off this past weekend, wrapped up last night with Monday Night Football. New segment here for Tuesdays. NFL Top 5, Bottom 5. We'll dive into that coming up next. It is The Extra Point. He is Sam Shapiro from WIS. I'm Tyler Head on your Tuesday here in the game.
Second and goal. Mason bobbling it, but a touchdown. What an impressive night tonight for Jordan Mason. And that caps a 70-yard drive.
Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head, Sam Spear, from WIS along with you on this Tuesday. And that was the call last night on Monday Night Football. Joe Buck calling Jordan Mason's touchdown as he torched the Jets defense. 28 carries, 147 yards, 1 touchdown in place of Christian McCaffrey, who was announced as inactive before the game. And Jordan Mason, the undrafted 30-year guy out of Georgia Tech, took his place pretty easily and helped the 49ers to a 32-19 win over the Jets.
My homies do not enjoy Jordan Mason at all, including myself. I'm not a fan. As a longtime Morning Jets fan that grew up rooting for Chad Pennington, that was tough to watch. I mean, he played phenomenal. He had credit to Trent Williams, giving him a lot of holes up the left side, but I mean, he ran all over us.
Yep.
I can't dispute it, and it lent himself a lot to kind of free up the pass game, especially for Ayuk and Debo.
I think that's a testament to just how much of a machine the 49ers are when you have Kyle Shanahan, who's perhaps the best offensive mind in all of football right now. You can plug anybody in. There's a reason he's been to a Super Bowl with Brock Purdy and Jimmy Garoppolo. You can take not the highest caliber talent and be successful with them within that system. And again, Jordan Mason is not Christian McCaffrey, but he looked like him last night.
And that is 1,000% mainly, I would say, because the Niners completely outcoached the Jets on every front. I mean, the biggest thing to me was I don't even think the Jets had possession of the ball for more than 25 minutes of the entire 60-minute game. Mm-hmm. So when you kind of looked at it, going into the fourth quarter, I think Aaron Rodgers only had the ball for 15 minutes.
Yeah.
So the fact that they even put up 19 points on the board, I mean, that's more than, I would say, close to half the games the Jets did last year.
Best thing about last night, 32-19 is a scoregami. That is a score that's never happened in NFL history. I don't know about you. I always get excited for a scoregami.
A scoregami.
Do you follow NFL scoregami on Twitter?
I've never heard of NFL.
Let me put you on scoregami because it will enlighten you during NFL weekends of scores that have never happened in the history of the NFL. And last night was the first.
Are there like anticipated ones that like people are
It's a whole thing. I'll bring you into the world of scoregami. Don't you worry about that.
NFL scoregami. Well,
but that
plugged this morning.
That wrapped up week number 1 of the NFL season. And like I said, we're going to start doing on Tuesdays here when Sam's in with me is NFL top 5, bottom 5. We'll give our top 5 teams and the bottom 5 teams based on what we have seen so far in the NFL season. Very easy this week because everybody's only played one game, so very easy to pick winners in the top 5 and losers in the bottom 5. I got to start off my top 5. Pretty easy. Kansas City. I mean, they beat the Ravens on Thursday night to open up the season. You got Patrick Mahomes. Xavier Worthy is going to be very exciting to watch. A wide receiver brings a lot of speed to that team. Defense speaks for itself. Like, they look like a team that is destined to win yet another Super Bowl.
Yeah, and they didn't even need Travis Kelce on Thursday. I mean, that, like you said, Worthy was a great addition to that receiver core. I mean, we don't really know what's going to happen with Rashid Rice yet, but I mean,
while he's playing, he should be fine.
Absolutely. And then Pacheco also actually looked like a stud. He kind of looked like a stud. I going into the season, I was like, all right, he's a little overrated, main back. He's obviously going to get all the touches, but he looked pretty solid. Yeah. And I think he dealt with a pretty tough Ravens defense too on the offensive front. But
are they your number 1 as well?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I think they really just added to what they were kind of lacking, which was was truly a strong receiver core, and Kelce made up for it last year that they didn't really have, strength on the receiver front. I mean, I feel like the joke last year was, all the receivers on Kansas City have Butterfingers. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of interesting because you see this first game, Kelce kind of takes a step back, but now you have more hands in the room.
Sure.
So I'm hoping that doesn't mean he gets less catches because I have him on both of my fantasy teams this year, but Yeah, I got Chiefs at 1 as well.
Both got Chiefs at 1. As cliche as it sounds, yes, it was a Super Bowl last year. I think San Francisco's still number 2. Again, even without Christian McCaffrey, they didn't really skip a beat last night on offense. You got playmakers at every level of this offense. Defense, again, speaks for itself. It's hard to not put them at number 2 for me.
Yeah, and the defense, too, for the 49ers. Fred Warner, one of the best in the game, one of the best linebackers in the game as well. You kind of can't overlook that. And, Breece Hall was really, I would say, 2/3 really of what kind of got the Jets offense going, especially at the start of the game. So the fact that they were able kind of to contain him was, as a Jets fan, it was hard to watch.
Who's your number? Is that your number 2 as well?
Yeah.
Okay. Agreeing on 1 and 2 there. Yeah, I know, pretty easy. This one might be a little more controversial. I think Dallas is number 3 for me. So both Dak and CD have gotten paid now. Dak literally hours before the game happened on Sunday, they dismantled Cleveland. Looked good. Defense took two balls away from Deshaun Watson. Dallas is a great regular season team. They just can't win in the playoffs for whatever reason, minus, sending Tom Brady to retirement a couple years ago. But again, in season, they look great, and they look just as good on Sunday.
And to your point, I mean, even Zeke didn't look washed for the first time since, he jumped in the Salvation Army Bowl?
Yeah.
So it was exciting to see him actually on the field, smiling, getting some carries. It wasn't just a clip of, him going through the drills in practice and then him looking like he was winded and ready to retire next season. But, Dak, I feel like usually kind of, stuffs the stat sheet a little bit. And I feel like, CD will kind of go off for 2 touchdowns. But when you're playing a top 5 defense like that, sometimes you have to make sacrifices to win. And I think Dallas really did that over this past weekend. And that's why they came up, dropping a 30 burger on, Cleveland.
Who's your number 3?
My number 3, I'm actually going to go with Buffalo here.
Okay.
Usually I say they're very overrated, and, this might be a little biased because I'm a Jets fan and whatnot, but, I mean, Josh Allen looked like Superman. He really did.
Flying through the air.
4 total touchdowns on the weekend. I mean, you got to be fired up if you're a Bills fan for sure.
The offense is great. I'm a little hesitant about giving up 28 points to the struggling Cardinals, which is what kept them out of my top 5. But hey, win's a win.
Yeah, I mean, and that's all just kind of, fixing kinks throughout the week, I kind of feel like. So I think that's, maybe something they could fix. But I think because of how they came into this matchup, guns blazing offensively, that's why I got them at my number 3.
Quickly, I'll run through my last 2 here. I got Philadelphia at number 4. Team chemistry seems pretty good now. There was a lot of conversation in the offseason about, the Sirianni and Hurts thing. They got new offensive coordinator and Kellen Moore coming in there. They looked great. A.J. Brown looks like he's on his way. The 1,000-yard season. Saquon Barkley looked the best he's ever looked in the NFL, it seemed like, when he's finally behind a competent offensive line. And then I know they lost, but Baltimore's at number 5. Again, I mean, if Isaiah Likely gets his toe in bounds, we're having a different conversation here. Look very effective on offense. The combination of Lamar and Derrick Henry going to be very exciting to watch this year. Defensively, again, always going to be very good. And I think they're going to see KC once again down the road in the playoffs again.
Yeah, kind of just going really quick, my number 4 is the Texans. I think Stephon Diggs really adds to that wide receiver group. And, I mean, he only had, 5 catches, but I think a third of them were, or 6 catches, but I think a third of them were touchdowns. Mm-hmm. And the Texans went into that game with a bounty on their head, came up with a big division win, Stroud looking good in his second year.
Yes.
So, just very exciting to see what they're going to do. And then I actually have a tie for 5 with also the Ravens, but the Lions as well. Lions don't blow that lead. They look just as strong as they did last year going into this season.
Sure.
And that's really, really exciting. And then the Ravens, that 1-2 punch with Henry and Jackson is going to be unstoppable in the run game. If they had more receiving help, I think they would be comparable to Kansas City, but they only got Zay Flowers right now. So
sure.
That's why I got them tied for 5.
So that is the top 5 of the NFL. The fun part comes next when we get to talk about the bottom 5, the 5 worst teams in the league after week number 1. We'll hit that coming up next. A reminder coming up on Thursday, by the way, Carolina Calls with Coach Beamer and Todd Ellis, 6 o'clock, which you can listen to right here on The Game. It is the Extra Point. Sam Spear and Tyler Head along with you on your Tuesday here on The Game. Welcome back in. Extra Point, Tyler Head, Sam Spurrier along with you here on your Tuesday on the Game. By the way, if I didn't specifically mention that last segment, Jordan Mason did win our Who Did the Heavy Lifting award for the week. Thanks to our friends at TC Equipment Rentals for that rushing performance last night. Again, 147 yards and a touchdown in filling in for the injured Christian McCaffrey, which again just shows how good the 49ers' offense is, no matter who is playing at the skill spots. Now time for our NFL bottom five. This is the fun part because we get to talk about the worst teams of the week. We'll go from 28 down to 32 here. I'll start off. I got Denver at 28. Look, not a good team a year ago. You got a rookie quarterback. You're going to have growing pains. Didn't have much of a running game. You played a okay-ish Seattle team. They have the potential to get a lot better, but for the time being, it's going to be a little bit of a slog for them.
Who did you say was your
28? Denver.
Yeah. I mean, I just saw the one shot of Bo Nix throwing that pick into triple coverage, and I was like, it's going to be a while.
It's going to take a little bit. And again, Sean Payton, a great coach in general, offensive mind, but it's going to take some molding for Bo Nix to get where they need him to be.
Yeah, and to your point, that could be something good for him to kind of come into, learn from, kind of get his feet wet in a system. Most rookie quarterbacks don't really come in guns blazing, looking great, unless you're either Anthony Richardson last year or I believe Jaden Daniels this year, but. Most of the time, they usually don't come in looking like a stud.
Who's your 28?
My 28? I'm going with the Falcons. I think Kirk Cousins is overrated. I know we were kind of talking about this. You were kind of saying more. You don't think he's 100% since that it was his MCL injury.
Yes, correct. He just didn't look like he was as fluid in movement as he should have been on Sunday.
Yeah, and I don't know why the heck they paid him a 4-year, $180 million deal to come down there, especially now with Michael Penix in the back, as his second string. To me, it's just the fact that it's taken this long for this team to really, truly utilize Kyle Pitts and the talent that he is, because I feel like he was kind of just collecting dust on their shelf at this point.
Seemed that way. My 29, Las Vegas, 3 turnovers in their loss to the Chargers. They got outrushed 176-71. Gardner Minshew sacked 4 times. Again, you got Gardner Minshew as your quarterback. You can only go so far. I get it. Antonio Pierce was a player's coach, and everybody likes him, but I don't know how far this team's going to go this year.
Yeah, I need Gardner Minshew to throw the ball a little bit better because I have Devontae Adams in my fantasy team.
As do I.
And he is a stud, regardless of who's catching the ball. So, or who's throwing the ball, excuse me.
Who's your 29?
My 29, I actually picked the Titans.
Okay.
I think they are wasting the talent that is DeAndre Hopkins, and I think they need to go back to the drawing board with Will Levis. I just think he just looked, obviously, we were kind of talking about Bo Nix, maybe not coming into this game, maybe confident. If he was coming into this game confident at all, he certainly didn't look that way towards the end of that game against Chicago. He quite literally threw it away.
They are actually my 30. Who's your 30?
This is funny. We switched. I picked the Broncos.
Okay, yeah. Perfect. Makes a lot of sense. And again, those two teams, you can only go so far with young quarterbacks. I don't have a lot of faith that Will Levis is going to be much of anything in his career. I think Bo Nix has a higher upside, but makes sense both those teams are in the bottom. Final 2 teams here. My 31 is going to go to the New York Giants, completely dominated by Sam Darnold, which that is something nobody should say. Daniel Jones looked awful. Pass rush was in his face the entire time. You only got one hit or one collective quarterback hit from Brian Burns and Kayvon Thibodeau. So even defensively, they're struggling as well.
And I just want to rub this in because my entire childhood was all of my friends who were Giant fans rubbing in the fact that the Giants were always better than the Jets. And today is a new day.
The tide has certainly turned.
Although the Jets, didn't look great last night. We're not the second worst team in the NFL today, and Daniel Jones has thrown more pick sixes than touchdowns since he has re-signed. And I don't know what looks uglier, how he played on Sunday or those uniforms.
Those uniforms were pretty egregious. I think they said it looked like the Montreal Canadiens.
It was bad. It was really bad. Whoever designed them, figure it out.
I think we're going to collectively agree the Panthers are still the worst team in the NFL.
Oh, yeah, unfortunately.
But Bryce Young doesn't look any better. And I get it. It's one game, but you got completely boat raced by the Saints, who aren't that great of a team, by the way. I think Bryce threw a pick on his first play of the game, continues to make bad decisions. Defense doesn't look better. They just lost Derek Brown, potentially for the season, one of their better defenders. Like, it's a mess, and it's not going to get better anytime soon.
I think in their last 3 games, they've given up 82 points to their opponents, and I believe they've only scored 10. I mean, when you're giving up 82 points in 3 games,
not a lot of high hope.
Yeah, I'm just hearing nails on a chalkboard at this point. But it doesn't seem like they've really added a lot over the offseason. I know they got Leggett.
They got Leggett, and he made a few catches on Sunday, but one draft pick is not going to
save your whole
change
franchise.
The tides of this team. It's going to be a long rebuilding process if they ever get back to relevancy. But this year looks like it's going to be another long season for the Carolina Panthers. That does our NFL top 5, bottom 5. Again, this is going to be fun to track throughout the weeks of the NFL season, especially when we get to talk about the worst teams in the league.
So, serious question for you, Tyler. The London game with the Panthers and the Giants, who you got?
I don't want to watch, to be honest with you.
Me neither.
That is going to be very offensive. All right, Sam. Appreciate it as always, and we'll check back in with you here soon.
Thanks.
That'll do it for today's edition of the Extra Point. Coming up next, it's the Gamecock Club Hour presented by Crans Heating and Cooling. Ethan Petrie, Gamecock Baseball, sitting down with Chris Clark. You'll hear that coming up next right here on your Tuesday on the Game.
When you're looking for someone to help you with services out at your home, regardless of what type of service it is, you're going to want to work with somebody who's local, somebody who's very reliable. And so let me tell you a little bit along those lines about our friends over at Classic Roofing, Joe Reeder, Max Sawyer. ClassicRoofingSC.com. They are local families that live right here in the Midlands, and you can be assured they are also reliable. Why? Well, only 7% of roofers nationwide are GAF certified. The guys over at Classic Roofing, they are GAF certified. It's a rarity in this business. That means you'll be hiring a company that has proven themselves capable of providing high-quality work every time. Roof inspections, roof installations, roof replacements, and roof repairs. Check out what they can do for you at ClassicRoofingSC.com or give them a call for a free estimate, 803-590-7870.
Welcome back in. It is the Gamecock Club Hour, presented by Krantz Heating and Cooling. Tyler Head and Chris Clark along with you on this Tuesday. Appreciate Ethan Petrie making a little bit of time for the sit-down interview that you had with him. And obviously we're in the midst of football season. Baseball season feels very far away, but we can't forget the hype that we had in the middle of the summer when Palmineri gets hired after Coach Kingston gets let go, and what the expectations for this baseball team are going to be when the spring rolls around.
Well, this is a program that has high expectations all the time. And quite frankly, y'all, that's why there has been a couple of coaching changes. The last couple coaches with Chad Holbrook and then with Mark Kingston. You bring in Paul Maneri, who it was kind of funny now that some time has passed and you think back on that search and how he kind of came out of nowhere.
Literally.
It just one day, hey, Paul Maneri. Oh. And a guy who was not at the time in the game, a guy who, yes, is a little bit on the older side, but still I've had an opportunity to hear Paul Maneri speak a little bit, not just at his press conference, talk with a bunch of people who've interacted with him, and still very, I think, energetic. That time off, I think, really recharged him and mentally, physically. And I think he's ready to go, and it was interesting hearing Ethan talk about him like almost with reverence, just a lot of respect for what Paul Maneri's done. And look, I think a lot of people in Columbia, Gamecock fans, wanted, what you heard a lot was bring in a guy who's won, bring in a proven winner. And I mean, that's what he is. You go back and look at what he's done in his career.
Well, and during that coaching search, and again, it's so funny to think back to the Maneri thing coming out of nowhere. I think I filled in for Bill because it was Monday when that rumor got out there. I think it was Teddy Cahill of Baseball America was the first one to put some out there about it. I took a nap that afternoon, like 1 o'clock or whatever, and I wake up and just the text messages are blowing up and all the group texts that we have, and Maneri, and I'm like confusingly like, what is this? And I look, and sure enough, it's like South Carolina in line to hire Paul Maneri. It was been away from the game for a couple of years, and I'm like, all right, I guess that's what's happening. And obviously, everybody very excited about that. But like you said, with all the names that got thrown out there were guys that were building programs. There were guys that were doing good things, but Maneri's been there. He's held a national championship. He's made several trips to Omaha. And again, it's not that Kingston was a bad coach, but he couldn't get you where this program was expected to be. And just getting to the postseason is not good enough. And I think the nail in his coffin after losing the regional at NC State was like, I still think this was a successful season. Like, no, especially after making it to a super last year, you came up a step short of that this year. People don't accept that around here, which again, I think he kind of knew he was a dead man walking at that point in time and could say whatever he wanted to say. But, Maneri comes in here with the pedigree. Maneri comes in here with the reputation of being one of the best coaches in his era at LSU. And we certainly hope that's going to translate to a lot of success and getting this program back to where it thinks it deserves to be, and that's Omaha not every single year at least, but on a regular basis. Yeah,
it's been a while,
sure.
And look, in some ways, I mean, Ray Tanner set a nearly impossible standard. It's like you go to Omaha 3 times in a row, you win it twice, you almost win it, you finish as the runner-up the 3rd time, and then you become an AD, and you are going to go down from that. You were not, nobody goes to Omaha every single year. And look, I don't think people expect that. But the problem is you've slipped too much. Even if you are very reasonable and say, hey, I'm just kind of making this up. I want to make an Omaha once every 4 years or something. You may say, well, that's too much. That's too little, whatever. I think we could agree that's like somewhat reasonable.
Sure.
Wherever you fall. Even that doesn't get to that level of making it there all the time. But, maybe you say, once every 6 years, once every 5, once every 4. The point is South Carolina has not done it in that time span.
Right.
And Ray Tanner was the last to do it. And it's been too long. A lot of that was because of the success Tanner obviously had here, but this is a baseball program that people expect more. And so Maneri is a guy who's been there. He won the title in 2009, finished as the runner-up in 2017. And here's great look at it statistically. He was at LSU for 15 seasons. They made it to Omaha 6 times. So that's considered a great record. That's, 1 in 3 years.
Right.
That's pretty darn good. And I think most people would take that. I don't know if people are sitting around with the pitchforks banging their fists. We got to win another title. Obviously, you would love that, but you got to get there. And so I think really the feel was, with some of Holbrook's teams and some of some of Kingston's teams, I think sometimes you felt like, man, they've underachieved a little bit, relative to the talent. They haven't squeezed out. Ray Tanner was great at squeezing out the most out of his teams, especially the back part of his career. I think people are looking at Mainieri saying his level of, been there, done that, his experience, his knowledge could help them get over the top because he just knows how to manage those situations. So, I love the way Ethan put it. He's like, just trying to get him to describe what Mainieri's like. He's like, yeah, it's just he has this aura. It's kind of like if Ray Tanner had come back into the dugout and decided to coach again.
Sure. No, it's a reputation that speaks for itself. And again, that national championship was 2009, but he's only a couple years removed from being in the dugout at LSU, where these guys, like a Petrie, like Messina, these guys that are where Messina's obviously gone now, but they know who he is. They're well aware of what he's accomplished, and I'm sure they were involved in his recruiting process as well, talking to schools that were interested in him, as he was coming up through high school and all that kind of stuff. So he's still very relevant. Again, it's not like he stepped away in 2010 and hasn't been in the game since then. And even being away from the game the past couple of years, he's still very ingrained in the LSU program, the past couple of years, and still very beloved from everything we've heard down there in Baton Rouge. So excited to see what he's going to do in his first year here at Carolina next spring.
Another great stat about Mainieri. He was there, as I said, for 15 seasons at LSU, and in 11 of those years, they won some type of title. And now if you want to be fair, you can say, well, Chris, those were the earlier to middle part of his career. In 18, 19, 20, 21, they didn't win a title. Fair.
Yeah.
But in 2 of those years, they made it to a Super.
True.
And 1 of those years, the season got canceled after they were 12-5. So hard to know what would have happened there. Most people are going to take, if you say, hey, you can pick one. You can win, your division. Back when they had divisions.
Sure.
You can win your division or you can make it to a Super. Which one are you going to take? most people probably can take the Super.
Sure.
A lot of teams don't win their conference and they go on to make it to Omaha, et cetera. Right. Guy's got a great track record. And, all the players seem really excited about him from what we've heard.
You said the thing about the 12-5 at, the COVID cancellation back in 2020. Was there ever a year where more people believed their team was going to Omaha than 2020? Because everybody looked around and was like, well, we got the team this year. And again, you can't prove otherwise because the rest of the season got canceled.
Well, same thing, I'll say, man, like women's basketball with South Carolina, it's kind of hard to
it's
hard to envision. Now Oregon would say, no.
Sure.
We were going to win. But, man, would you really, really bet against Dawn Staley with the squad she seemed to have that year? Yeah, that was unfortunate. The Gamecock baseball was 12-4 to start that year. LSU was 12-5. Very hard to tell what would have happened.
Yeah. God, when I was at Georgia, we were talking about, man, that season got canceled. So it would have been an Omaha team again. And even though Coach Strickland never took a team to Omaha. So
still,
the belief was there for sure. It's funny, talking about Mainieri here is this weekend, of course, South Carolina and LSU game day going to be in town. Jack and I were talking yesterday, just kind of throwing out ideas of, potential guest pickers. Some people did bring up Mainieri, like, hey, it's a guy with connections to both programs.
Yeah.
I don't know if his name is as relevant nationally to a college football crowd, but you have 2 fan bases that care a lot about college baseball. So it resonates a lot with them, but I don't know if the person that's tuning in Chicago to watch college game days, who's this guy? You know what I mean? So I don't know if that's the direction they're going to go, but it's not a bad idea.
Well, what they could have done is saved Phelps for this week since he liked to come to Columbia and have a little fun.
He's
back in the day.
He even referred to it as USC when he and McAfee actually picked the Gamecocks on Saturday.
But Phelps, I don't count that. Phelps picked USC and then corrected himself. Said, sorry, South Carolina.
Okay.
You know what I mean? So I think he gets dinged a little for that. But Phelps,
well,
you've heard the stories.
Oh,
right?
I'm well aware of.
He liked to have a little fun back in the day.
Presence in Columbia, and I just think about the other people that were at that get together that maybe not have been of the sound mind that woke up the next day like, did I party with Michael Phelps?
Did I dream that? An Olympian? Maneri's an interesting thought. I feel like he might be like, even if they did ask him, and I don't know, by the way.
Sure.
No info on that yet. I feel like he'd be like, y'all really going to put me on TV and make me pick against, because he'd have to pick South Carolina.
Yeah, he would have to pick
all
South
the LSU
Carolina.
fans that show up at game day are going to have to boo their former coach.
All the good grace that he still has with people at Baton Rouge might go out the window pretty quickly.
Tough spot to be in.
Yeah, probably not. Again, it's an interesting idea. What Darius Rucker's done it the past couple times. He was the guest picker when they were in Charlotte last year for the Week 1 game. Don Staley would obviously make a lot of sense. I don't think Asia Wilson could navigate a flight from Indiana the night before after playing the Fever. That's probably not possible. There are a couple other names. There's a small list of options ahead of Saturday that I'm sure we'll find out here the next couple days who they actually pick.
By the way, the baseball schedule isn't out. I was curious, and maybe I've just missed that it's already been announced. It's not on the official schedule. I was wondering if Gamecocks played LSU this year in baseball. They do play Air Force at Founders Park.
How about that?
Paul Maneri spent some time there at Air Force. So,
small world.
Yeah, I don't know. Guest picker ideas. I don't know if you have any insight. If you have any ideas, let us know.
Yeah, absolutely. 803-404-6100. We'll come back and wrap up today's edition of the Gamecock Club Hour. And we'll have plenty more conversation about the Kentucky game, kind of football on that, get to some things we didn't get to yesterday, but also touch on some things that happened around college football we didn't have time for yesterday as well. It is the Gamecock Club Hour presented by Crans Heating and Cooling. Tyler and Chris, along with you on your Tuesday here in the game. Welcome back in. It is the Gamecock Club Hour, presented by Crayons Heating and Cooling. Tyler Head, Chris Clark along with you here on your Tuesday. We'll jump back into more of the Kentucky conversation, kind of put a bow on what happened on Saturday before we transition over to LSU as the week rolls along. But there's a lot of things that happened in college football over the weekend we didn't have time to get into yesterday. Some SEC teams that we thought were maybe dominant, looking a little shaky against less than stellar opponents. One of those being Alabama, who, if you check the box score after the game, 42-16, sounds about right. If you watch that game, you'll know it was a 1-point game with about 8 minutes to go, and Alabama poured it on late to make it look better than it was.
Yeah, it just got away from South Florida at the end. South Florida 2 for 18 on third down. Tight game. I mean, South Florida put up a little over 300 yards of offense. They limited Bama. It was an ugly game. There were 24 penalties.
Mm-hmm.
There were Bama. Here's the key stat: Alabama 3 turnovers, South Florida 0.
Yep.
That's how you let an inferior opponent hang around. It was kind of funny before leading up to that game. South Florida Twitter. Did you know that was a thing?
I did not.
They have some people. It's not like the strength or the tenacity of like Tennessee or FSU Twitter.
Sure.
FSU Twitter's been a little more quiet lately.
no reason to brag these past couple
Tennessee
weeks.
humming. Tennessee
definitely
fully
so.
convinced of their greatness.
They're feeling good right now.
They are good. They're really good. But yeah, South Florida Twitter, they were passing around between the 10 of them. We retired Saban last year because you remember how like haggard he looked.
That game looked awful. I mean, they put on a touchdown the last minute to make it a 14-pointer, but it was a slog in that game. And I mean, we were all writing off Alabama because they just lost to Texas, looked awful against South Florida. There's no way this team's going to win the SEC and go to the college football playoff, and Saban always finds a way. But yeah, another shaky performance by South Florida that, again, it's week 2 of the season, not trying to overreact, but I think there are a lot of people in Columbia that kind of raise an eyebrow to that and be like, maybe Tuscaloosa isn't as daunting as it seems here in October.
Yeah, the thing that we don't know yet, we have. I think we said this yesterday. I mean, we have 2 weeks of data across college football. I think we have some ideas about elite teams. Like Georgia's an elite team. We've seen enough. What they did against Clemson, a tidy performance last week. Texas certainly looks like one of those elite teams. But some of the teams in the top 10, Missouri, Ole Miss, they look great.
Missouri hasn't given up a point yet.
Missouri hasn't given up a point. Ole Miss has scored 100-something points.
A
bunch of points. They haven't given up much either. But they haven't really played anybody. And they actually won't play. I mean,
they play Kentucky the week before Carolina.
Missouri has BC.
That may not really tell us a whole lot about them.
It might not either. Missouri has BC this week. The only ranked matchup.
Crazy.
Weird.
Right.
Ole Miss has Wake Forest.
Yeah.
So Wake is a little bit more of a challenge than.
At least it's Power 4.
It's Power 4. I don't know. Not a huge challenge. Point is, even for some teams that look really, really good, they haven't really been tested. A lot of them. Texas has been tested. Georgia's been tested. Bama, have they really been tested yet?
No.
I mean, South Florida gave them something. So the point is, I don't really know.
We get tested this weekend.
Yeah.
Wisconsin.
How much do we know about a bunch of teams? We don't. Right now, one of the conversations going on in Gamecock Nation, it's been fun. I was telling you this during the break. Going in, some people felt like, Kentucky, big challenge, which it was.
Mm-hmm.
Don't know if we can win. I didn't pick South Carolina to win. But I didn't think South Carolina was going to I didn't think they had no shot or anything like some people said.
No.
I picked a 3-point game and wouldn't have been surprised however went. Definitely didn't think South Carolina would win 31-6. Now a bunch of people are saying Kentucky stinks. They're terrible. I don't know if we know that. They might be a pretty good team. Their record might not be very good because, as Stoops pointed out yesterday, they're about to play 4 of the top 6 teams or so in the next several weeks.
Yep. By the way, they've taken to calling him Coach Poops, apparently, on the message boards, according to Preston, which I think's hilarious.
That's phenomenal. What a difference 2 weeks makes for them.
I mean, they were ready to crown this guy SEC Coach of the Year after 35 minutes against Southern Miss.
I do, back to your point, the schedule, the perception of a schedule always shifts a little bit. You might be looking at Missouri and Ole Miss right now and going, those are going to be even harder than I thought.
Right.
You might be looking at Bama and Oklahoma going, Oklahoma, 16-12 over a pretty subpar Houston team.
That they don't have a lot of faith in their offense right now.
So, but it's just been 2 weeks.
Sure.
I think you have a little bit more time between those games. We're still gathering, I think, a lot of data, and there's a lot of parity this year. There are a lot of teams that are really good. I think every team in the SEC, maybe except Mississippi State. I was saying Mississippi State and Vandy. Can't say that anymore. Vandy's better.
Vandy's what? Shut out Alcorn State, won the overtime game against Virginia Tech last week. They're running out of fireworks.
I don't know if they'll win an SEC game.
I don't know.
But they will be more of a challenge than they have been for sure. So every team in the SEC looks either about the same or maybe even better.
Sure.
Not everybody's record is going to be better. There's 16 teams in the league, and it's going to be a slog. So it's been fun to watch first couple weeks, and I think we'll continue learning more about these teams. And there's, week to week.
I think we're setting our table for a very chaotic season of college football. And again,
love it.
More games are going to matter in November because there's 12-team spots. Like, I'm not saying we're going to hit 2007 levels, but this is going to be a fun year to watch because 2 weeks in, we've gotten some surprises, to say the least.
It's been a wild season, and we've got, kind of a tongue-in-cheek thing. You got Pat Forty out there with the playoff projection. That's Vandy and South Carolina and Boston College.
I mean, hey, there's only one number one team right now.
That's right.
It's South Carolina. We'll jump back into the Kentucky conversation, talk about game balls, as well as talk about a few guys we didn't get a chance to yesterday, like Mazeo Bennett and Vakari Swain. It's coming up next in the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Head, Chris Clark, along with you on your Tuesday here on The Game.
All right, we've been talking all morning about college football, the great and chaotic season that it's really already been so far and probably will be. And so you want to make sure you catch up on all the action and have the very best setup so you can maximize your enjoyment. Hit up our friends over at Integrated Media. Michael and Nathan, I've trusted them personally to come out to my home. They've mounted televisions for me. They've taken all the wires from my old video game systems and consolidated them, put them on a switcher. They can make you very organized and make sure that you have the very best home theater set up. You don't have to go to the big box stores. You can get great local customer service. They can help you with the equipment. They can help you mount it. Sonos wireless speakers, great internet signals, the very best audiovisual equipment. IntegratedMediaInc.com or 803-948-8327. That's our friends Michael and Nathan at Integrated Media.
11 o'clock, welcome in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Head, Chris Clark along with you on this Tuesday here on the game. Making a few final notes on the Kentucky game before we fully turn our attention to LSU coming up tomorrow. Big weekend ahead. Game day is going to be in town. Is SEC Nation going to be here as well? I haven't looked to see on that, but
question, Tyler.
a lot of times they'll be in the same place as game day. But a lot of things happening here. Gamecock Park will obviously be buzzing. I think they said they're going to open up the State Fair lots at 6 a.m.
The swamp.
The swamp,
is where
okay.
the SEC Nation is going.
Yeah,
for
A&M and A&M in Florida, which that could, if A&M goes in there and blows the doors off Florida, Napier might just get fired on the spot.
They won't let him.
They won't let him back in the building after that.
Key card. Yeah, 6 a.m. is correct. All university-controlled lots opening at 6 a.m. So,
have you been to game day before?
I have. I went to the most I did not go by, I don't think. I think I kind of like rode by. I did not really go participate the last time it was here. I think I went by and kind of saw the set, like being set up, all that kind of thing. I did go when it was in Charlotte for the UNC game.
Which that's a little different. It's a neutral site.
Yeah, neutral site, not here.
Like it was like a public park that they were out at in Charlotte.
Yeah, it was a park out there. It was a really cool setup, kind of a green space kind of right in the middle of the city. We stayed at a hotel so we could just walk there. It was really cool. But yeah, here I went by and saw the set and all that kind of stuff, but I did not go in there and hold up a sign or anything like that.
I went when Notre Dame came to Georgia in 2019.
Oh yeah.
That was crazy atmosphere in general. But
yes.
I got to the show kind of late and kind of had to stand off to the side, so I didn't have the best view, but I could say I was there. So if you get a chance to go, I would recommend getting there very early. Hopefully it's not raining on you, but should be a fun atmosphere and just a lot of buzz going into this weekend with game day being here and obviously welcoming a brand like LSU that, are they the national championship contender they've been in years past? Maybe not necessarily, but still. LSU come to town for the first time since 2008. Is that correct? It's been a while, right?
Yeah, that was because it was going to be here in 15, and that's when they had to move it to Baton Rouge.
That's right,
because of the weather. So yeah, I guess the Wilbur Hackett game was the last LSU game. Carolina, I think, haven't verified this myself, but I believe 12-2, I think, in favor of LSU in this series.
Mm-hmm.
So this would be one of those. It'd be one of those games where if you can go win it, it would be certainly meaningful. I mean, for the immediate future, you're 3-0,
sure,
on a game day game that's been a lot of eyes on it, but also just to kind of reverse what's been a trend in those recent games. By the way, Tyler, a couple quick things. I've gotten this question a lot on the Insiders Forum, seen it on social. So the game day broadcast will be at Gamecock Park.
Yep.
9 to 11. They're going to head into Williams-Brice Stadium for the final hour.
As they do for noon kicks.
That's right. You can watch on ESPN, ESPNU, and I got a question today of where exactly in Gamecock Park is this thing going to be? It's going to the set is going to be on the Tommy Suggs Garnet Way. So that's in between Williams-Brice Stadium and then across the street to the Jerry and Steve Spurrier indoor practice facility. So
give them a good shot of the stadium in the background, as they like to do.
Good shot of stadium, and also pretty cool. They're going to have some Sports Center hits Friday, and then the college football live show that's at 4 p.m. on ESPN2. That will be they will be broadcasting out there, and the park will be open. Gamecock Park will be open on Friday if you want to go hang out there. Maybe people camp out, Tyler. I don't know if they'll let them do that. Maybe.
Maybe. I know people get there really early to try and be at the front of the line, because if you want to get on TV or be right up next to the stage, you're going to have to beat a lot of people to get there. Elijah and I were theorizing yesterday how we can maybe drag McAfee onto our show, because we're going to be live from 7 until 9. So we're going to be your pre-college game day show live from the Party Lot of Sound and Images. So you can come by and see us and then go to game day.
McAfee, I feel like he might need he would definitely need some kind of private transportation to your site.
Where
back and forth?
Where in Columbia could McAfee get in the most trouble?
You know what? I'm not touching that.
You're not touching that?
Nope. I have immediate ideas.
I'm sure there's a lot of options.
There are a lot of options, and none of them are ones I'm going to talk about on the air. Don't put me in that spot. I'm not going to do it.
We'll save that for our After Dark podcast later. Obviously, Carolina fans feeling very good after what we saw Saturday against Kentucky. We ran a poll on Twitter yesterday. It's got about 30 minutes left, but I think the results are pretty much in the bag at this point in time. We asked, who are you giving your game ball to after Carolina crushed Kentucky? Options: Dylan Stewart, Lenore Sellers, Mazio Bennett, Nikki Minori. Dylan Stewart, the overwhelming winner, currently with about 60% of the vote. And again, only a few minutes left. You got Imanori second with 17%, Bennett third with 12, and Sellers in fourth with 9. I actually voted for Lenore Sellers because I thought what I saw from him from week 1 to week 2 was a significant step forward in his progression and, just kind of shaking off some of those cobwebs we saw against Old Dominion.
Yeah. You know who I think could have been put in there? If obviously several guys played well.
Sure. All these guys did.
Yeah, all those did. Let me give a snub or two. You can only put 4 guys in there.
Sure.
Put 10 players.
Twitter limits you to only so many characters. So
I think Kyle Kennard could have been in there.
Definitely.
I think maybe TJ Sanders. Heck, you probably could have picked several D linemen. Probably could have picked one of the linebackers too. I think that's probably the best 4. But Kyle Kennard probably could have been in there as well. Statistically, I think he had a forced fumble and a sack and a tackle or 2. So still, maybe a more modest stat line, but he had a big, I think impact on the game. So the entire front did. My mind went to Sellers and Dylan Stewart. That would have been my 2 guys. And I said yesterday, the defensive line, really the front, the defense, the front won South Carolina that game.
Sure.
Because they so limited Kentucky. I mean, you keep them out of the end zone, right? You create turnovers and more turnover opportunities. The ball went on I've never seen a football game, Tyler, where the ball has hit the ground 7 times, I think.
Right.
And no recovered fumbles by either team. I don't know if that's a first. I've never seen it.
Yeah, that's. I'm struggling to think of anything that would come close to it because the only turnovers were the interceptions in the game.
Yeah, the pick six and
the ball hit the turf quite a few times. Was it Simon that blew the block and then recovered the fumble after it?
It was Michael Smith.
Or Michael Smith, sorry.
Yeah, the first one, yeah.
Yeah, so. Yeah.
I mean, that was just good fortune. The other one, another Sellers fumble. Kentucky, 1 or 2 guys, different guys had it, and somehow Kamar Bell comes up with it. So pretty wild. But point I was going to was the defensive line won the game, not only with the turnovers, the other turnover opportunities, the pass rush. It was just eating Kentucky alive, frankly, up front. But you think about other things like field position, right? Kai Kroger did a great job. Could have put Kai Kroger in there. Could have put the special teams units on there as an MVP, I think. A lot of guys, a lot of units played well. But I think it helped South Carolina with some opportunities. Now, if you wanted to make an argument for Sellers, certainly some of those, he did throw a pick early. He did put the ball in danger on the ground, and those are things you got to clean up. Those could have easily gone the other way, and then we might be talking about a different game, possibly. But to your point, he showed a lot of growth. I think he showed growth from game 1 to game 2. I think he showed growth from the first to the second half in that game. Those plays that we just mentioned, unless I'm mistaken, they all happened in the first half. So I think he did a really good job, and credit where it's due. I think the staff did a good job of putting him in some spots. The reason I think you could make a good argument for him, I'd be curious to get your take on why you picked him. I go back to those third down plays. The 2 touchdowns, the one to Simon, the one to Mazio Bennett, I think they were good throws, sure, but they were schemed up. Those were scheme wins, I think, for South Carolina.
Sure.
And then they executed it well, and he put the ball where it needed to be. But the 3rd and 14 where you got two guys coming at you, I think Rocket picked one up on the outside, but Lenoris has to break the pocket, kept his eyes downfield, delivered a strike to Mazio. That was on a 3rd and 14. You end up scoring on the next play to Josh Simon. And in the 3rd and 11 play where he double clutches and delivers a strike to Jared Brown, they needed 11 yards on 3rd down, and they got 12 or 13 first down. So, and I think they scored on that drive too. So those were huge plays that illustrated that growth and really helped them put the game away.
It seemed like he just trusted himself more. One thing that we saw a lot of in game number 1, again, you had overthrows, you had underthrows, you had him not, going through progressions, cutting and running very quickly. And there were a lot of designed runs for him as well, which also I think Saturday showed that Dow Loggins trusted him a lot more because I think he only had 4 design runs when you don't include the sacks on his rushing stats there. But it just seemed like he was more composed. He was letting things develop downfield. Again, finding those wide open guys like Mazio Bennett, like finding Josh Simon for the touchdown. He just seemed more composed overall, which is, again, I think is a big step forward from what you would expect going from week 1 to week 2, shake off the jitters a little bit, going up against what is a pretty good pass defense in Kentucky, all things considered. Again, he didn't go out there and throw for 300 yards, but was very effective outside of the overthrow to Peyton Mangrum that was the interception. And I believe that was the only real bad throw that he made at the game. There were some drops as well, which, goes against him. But other than that, I think overall just a very solid, complete game. And like you said, in the second half, wasn't nearly as many mistakes as the first half.
Yeah, I think throwing the ball, he definitely trusted himself. You could tell, a big point of emphasis for him was going to be more aggressive. In the Old Dominion game, you look back and he admitted this too. Like he was a little timid, a little hesitant. He was not in this game, and frankly, that resulted in one time he held on to the ball for too long. Carolina missed a block on a couple of the fumble plays. You had the pick that just ended up being kind of a bad throw. Like you kind of try to maybe rush it or force it in there. You end up overthrowing it. There's a Kentucky defender there because they love to play that zone defense. Again, those are young player mistakes, but I do think we saw growth in some areas, and we'll probably continue to see it.
Sure. We'll dive into a little bit of what Coach Beamer had to say about things on offense, particularly when it comes to the wide receivers, coming up next as we roll through the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Reminder, since it is a home game week coming up on Friday, going to have the Friday tailgate at Columbia Craft with Jay and Elijah on Green Street in the Vista from 3 until 6 for the post-game show live. Again, that's coming up this Friday. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler and Chris, along with you on your Tuesday here in the game. Welcome back in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Head, Chris Clark along with you here on your Tuesday on the Game. Reminder, Gamecocks Game Day Tailgate, sponsored by Lexington Medical, is going to be out at the party lot at Sound and Images with myself and Elijah Campbell coming up this Saturday. Will be the game day before game day, actually. You can come by and see us and hang out for a little bit before College Game Day kicks off at 9 a.m. And, of course, everything with the game getting kicked off at noon to be able to listen to right here on the game as well. Getting back into the conversation coming away from Saturday against Kentucky, talked about Mazio Bennett as one of the potential guys to get a game ball based on our Twitter poll, which you guys overwhelmingly voted for Dylan Stewart there. Want to dive into the wide receiver conversation a little bit. Go back to what Beamer had to say on Saturday afternoon, talking about the performance of his wide receivers as a whole. Here's what he had to say.
Yeah, Mazio is a competitor. It was great to see him. Credit Lenoris. I mean, that's what he can do. He can extend plays, which he did on a couple of those big throws. And Mazio is a competitor that did some really good things for sure today. And I told those receivers at halftime. I think we had 21 plays at halftime. So I think the receivers are looking around like, what the heck? And I had to remind them, like, guys, we only played 21 plays, fellas. So it ain't like we've played a bunch of plays and had opportunities to throw. But I told those receivers at halftime, like, we're not going to be able to go out here and just run the ball 30 times in the second half and go home. We're going to have to make some plays in the passing game. And we felt confident doing that. And those guys did. Credit to Lenoris for scrambling and being able to create some plays and make plays downfield. Huge play in the game was, I don't even remember if we got points, but it seems like it was a big play in the game where we went for the fourth down or faked like we were going forward, and Brady Hunt came in there and did a great job on that little thing to draw them off sides. And can't remember if we got points out of that or not, but just,
Got a touchdown there.
Perfect. All right. So, but just stuff like that was a big play. The fourth down, it was a fourth down stop where I think we didn't get much out of it, or maybe held them to a field goal when they went for it. We would love to create, get a touchdown there. But receivers, we got a good group in there, and they'll continue to get better. I like that group. I like the progress they made this week, and we'll continue to lean on them. And Michael Smith, you saw him come in there, him and Josh Simon both, and make some catches, and they're weapons in the passing game also.
Starting specifically with Mazio Bennett, who, again, is a true freshman, but somebody that both you and Wes very high on coming out of high school, through camp and all that kind of stuff, saying, hey, watch out, this guy could come in and make an immediate impact. And so far through 2 games, 5 receptions, 81 yards, and a touchdown, and certainly looking the part.
Yeah, I mean, you need guys to emerge at the receiver position. The biggest thing, South Carolina's got to find a way to get better throwing the football downfield. I think that was a big concern coming into this season, and that concern was definitely validated in game 1. You didn't do a whole lot in the passing game, and what you did wasn't very explosive. I think in the first game you had what was the longest play? 41 yards to Vandrevius Jacobs, but a decent chunk of that was after the catch. It's not like you went out in the second game and tossed a bunch of bombs either, but they were able to hit some explosive passing plays. We went over them, the first play to Mazio Bennett, the Josh Simon play, the Mazio Bennett play. Great thing about those plays is I think you had kind of a combination of scheming guys open.
Mm-hmm.
Those guys, all those plays we mentioned, those guys were wide open. So when you get guys wide open, you can say, well, the defense busted the coverage. They obviously did in a couple instances there, but that typically means you got a pretty good play call on, especially when they're playing zone. You've caused some confusion. That's the point of play calling, is to cause confusion on the defense and get guys open. And that's what you did there, but you also had, one of those, you had a great individual play by Lenoris as well on the 3rd and 14 Mazio catch, the one that didn't go for a score, to extend that drive, and then you end up getting the play to Josh Simon. This group, I think, is not going to be – I don't think we'll get to the end of the year and say, man, that's an elite group. But they have some guys that are capable. I think they can get a little bit better from week to week. They got better from week 1 to week 2.
Yep.
The top 2 guys, this is how Beamer put it, and I think it's right from my vantage point. Jared Brown and Mazio are the best 2 guys right now. Could that even change? Maybe. they need some other guys to emerge behind them.
I think it's something that's going to evolve as the season goes along. Again, a guy like Mazeo Bennett is only played in 2 college games up to this point. You have these other guys that are coming in from the portal, like Jacobs, like Brown, that are still developing that rapport with Sellers as well as, Dow Loggins figuring out what he can do with these guys on offense. Speaking of receivers, I figured we were going to get this comment at some point, but Brian texted in a little bit earlier and says, what do you think we should do with Nick Harbor? Leave him or move him? And again, we've had this conversation many times. I know everybody's waiting for him to explode. But if it's going to happen this year, it was very unlikely to happen within these first couple games. It did draw a pass interference on Saturday, so there's that, and that's the potential of having a guy that fast that can draw that kind of attention from defenders. But his moment this year, if it's going to come, it's probably going to take a little bit of time because, again, he's been back with football for a month and a half at this point in time, roughly.
Yeah, and I think, Beamer fielded a question about that the other day and was a little, seemed a little even perturbed about it or probably just tired of answering that question because I think we know Beamer's a very team-oriented guy. He's going to obviously give individual players credit when it's due. But he's looking at the situation not as, well, if Nick Harbor gets better and if Nick Harbor emerges, then we'll be a better receiver corps. That's true, but that's also true of a Jacobs or, Delvon Campbell or name your guy, really.
But when you put a 5-star label on somebody, even though he wasn't a wide receiver coming out of high school, everybody is staring at him saying, do something. When's it going to happen? When's it going to happen?
The physical tools in terms of the size and the ability to run fast are greater than many others on the team, which is why people are so interested in him. The route running and maybe the consistency and some other things that are very integral to playing receiver, some other guys are probably ahead there, So I think each of those players, when you look at Harbor or when you look at Campbell or Jacobs or Gage Larvin, whoever you pick in that room, there's several guys that they're looking to. They can all get better in certain areas. I think they all have strengths. I think they all have things they need to get better at. I think people are looking at Harbor, like they look at that ball downfield where he drew the pass interference, said, why can't we do more of that? Well, that's fair. But you can also look at the other receivers and say, why can't Delvon Campbell, who's, that's kind of lost in this. He's 6'4" and can really run.
Sure.
Gage Larvin in college has caught a lot of passes. Jared Brown, there's still some potential to unlock for sure. Mazeo, there's a lot of guys that can continue getting better. So I don't think you have to look at it to kind of get back to the question. It's a good question, a fair question.
Yeah.
I don't think you have to look at it as, well, should we move positions? I mean, he played very well in special teams. That's important. You can use that skill. That was huge in that game, and he played a key role on one of those stops of Berry and Brown, using that speed to run down there on kickoff. Let's see what happens at receiver the rest of the year. I haven't heard any internal conversation about moving positions or anything like that right now.
Special teams stats aren't as sexy as offensive stats.
And they should be.
They should be, you would think.
You hold a guy who is tied for the SEC all-time lead in kick returns to basically nothing the whole day.
Right.
That's nice.
That's very significant for sure. But again, and I refer back to what I call shiny object syndrome. When you have the guy that's the 5-star, you have somebody that's very high profile coming out of the transfer portal, especially when you talk about, the extra hype he got from the video game this offseason where, hey, people around the country are talking about him that didn't know his name before last season. People waiting for something to happen. And again, it's not saying it can happen. And talking before the season, I said, could he be your best receiver by the end of the year? Certainly. Are you going to see that by game 2 or game 3? Probably not. It could be game 5 or 6. And then he's emerging like, hey, there he is. That's what we've been looking for this entire time. There's a development process. And I know that's something that is not everybody comprehends the same way because we're not watching practice and we're not seeing the nuance of his specific skill set being used and being, developed and all that kind of stuff. But it takes time. And that's the best advice I think we can give people is, unfortunately, you got to continue to be patient. And hopefully as the season rolls along, it continues to get better. And we're here at the end of the year saying, hey, look, finally it happened. But it's a wait and see kind of thing.
Yeah, and it's a wait because I don't know that will happen.
Sure.
I don't know who's going to be the leading receiver by the end of the year. I really don't. It's still very much an open question.
Literally any of the guys in the room are an option at this point. So we'll see what happens. We'll turn our attention to the defensive side of the ball, dive into a little bit of Vakari Swain as well, as he had a very good performance on Saturday against Kentucky as the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs rolls on your Tuesday here on The Game.
All right, if you're hungry here at lunchtime, you already know the recommendation I'm going to give you. It's Firehouse Subs. Delicious Firehouse Subs at 14 different locations all around the Midlands. So no matter where you are listening, you can be sure there's one close to you. Check out any of your classic Firehouse Subs favorites. Wes likes the brisket. Add bacon. Tyler, the TBR, the turkey bacon ranch. Mine, New York steamer. That's probably going to be hard to unseat, but I love all of them. Check out the new Firehouse Captain's Club is sauced and spiced to perfection. That's their new limited time offering. It features the classic Captain Sorensen's hot sauce. FirehouseSubs.com or download the Firehouse Subs app. They make it super easy to order. Avoid the wait. Order online. Sandwich will be waiting on you when you get to the store. Again, 14 different locations around the Midlands. FirehouseSubs.com or the app.
Welcome back in. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Head, Chris Clark along with you on your Tuesday here on the game. Continuing to look back at what happened at Kentucky over the weekend. 31-6 victory for South Carolina as they will turn their attention to LSU this upcoming weekend for a noon kick right here in Columbia. Somebody else that really emerged on Saturday that I think caught a lot of people's attention was Vakari Swain. Played 33 snaps on Saturday, made his presence known, forced an intentional grounding on one of the corner blitzes. One of the more impressive plays to me was when I think it was Sumo Karmbe that took the handoff, but came in on the blitz, looped behind, and made a tackle behind the line of scrimmage from behind, flying around out there. Obviously, very athletic guy. Somebody else, much like Mazio Bennett, that you and Wes have really sung the praises of quite a bit, and we saw that on full display on Saturday.
Yeah, for sure. I was going back to look. He was one of the highest graded players on the team, according to PFF. The interesting thing is, and several Gamecock fans have pointed this out to me, didn't seem like the PFF grades really matched the performance, particularly on defense. And I think that's a fair point. You know, a lot of times you can look at them and go, man, it seems like these are pretty close based on what you saw. These really don't. So that's just another reminder. Kind of use them as a guide.
Right.
Not the end-all, be-all. But Swain's, I think he started to show why we've been so high on him. You know, athletically, he's different. You know, there are some guys on the roster, I think, that are different from an athletic standpoint. Dylan Stewart's obviously example number one. He just can do things that are not typical, especially for a freshman. You know, Swain plays a position at defensive back in which, you know, there's typically a good bit of athleticism at that spot, but he kind of goes above and beyond. And I think back to him in high school, you know, he played every phase of the game. He was a return man. He was a receiver. He was a defensive back. And so much so athletic and so dangerous with the ball in his hands that there was kind of a push and pull of what is he going to be. But Torian Gray, who does, I think, a good job of recruiting guys to stay on defense, you know, won that battle to keep him on the defensive side of the ball. And that's kind of where they had always envisioned him playing.
Sure.
But they kept him there. And, heck, I think if Vakari Swain were in the receiver room right now, he could be a starter. Like, he's that good with the ball in his hands. But he has a ton of upside, upped his snap count from game 1 to game 2, and I think showed enough to continue to maybe up his role and his impact.
Is he your best option as far as being a guy from that secondary that could come in on blitzes and pass rush for what you have right now?
Yes, I think so. You know, O.D. Fortune, I think he kind of quietly had a really good game. Like, he quote-unquote gave up the one longer pass, but that was just a great catch and throw by Kentucky, honestly. Very, very tight play. Those are going to happen, I think, in this league. Rebounded the very next play, made a great read on a little kind of bubble screen to the flat, completely blew that play up. He's a coverage guy. You know, he can be utilized on those things. But, yeah, you just look in the secondary. You know, I think Nicky, when you put him in those spots because of his size and athleticism ratio, would be effective. But Swain's just so twitchy. You know, I mean, he's very – you just watch him move around out there, and you can see it. You know, there was a play, Brock Vandegrift almost had one other pick for sure, and then there was another ball that he kind of put in danger where they were backed up in their end zone. He might have even thrown the ball from the end zone, and it kind of hung up there for a second, and there's really nobody around, and then you look at the bottom of your screen, and here comes this DB just flying in. It was Vakari Swain. Almost picked it off. Looked like he had no chance to get even close to that ball, and he got a lot closer than you would think. So, yeah, that type of athleticism, it just makes him slippery. You know, when he's coming in and a back or a tight end's trying to get a handle on him, it's tough. So I think that we saw that the defensive game plan, they changed things up. They disguised. They sent blitzes. They sent zone blitzes. I think you look at what he did, and he's an asset. But Wes pointed out earlier this week, Had some really nice coverage reps as well. He kind of just checks all those boxes, like size, athleticism, coverage ability, and he has ball skills. You know, when the ball is in the air, he's dangerous, and then he's dangerous after the catch. So I think at some point in his South Carolina career, he's going to grab a pick and show what he can do with the ball in his hands.
Right. Well, certainly plenty of reason to be excited about him, but obviously a lot of the attention nationally for South Carolina's defense revolves around Dylan Stewart. Let's play cut number 7 here, Dave. This is Josh Pate, who will actually also be in town this weekend for his whole new Saturday tour, coming to Columbia on Saturday for the LSU game, talking about what he's noticed of Dylan Stewart and his emergence so far this season.
And you're watching the replay, and you're saying two things. Number one, how's this happening? Number two, who is that guy coming off the edge? That's Dylan Stewart. Man, how long's he been there? About 15 minutes, because he's a true freshman. He had, according to, I believe, our buddies over at South Carolina's SI website, he had the best, well, it's according to PFF. They went and found the stat. He had the best PFF grade for a Power 5 edge rusher since 2020. In the post-COVID era, Dylan Stewart, true freshman, just puts up the best PFF grade for any edge player in Power 5. You need to go back and watch him. And they got a big game coming up Saturday, so you will see him a little bit more. Dylan Stewart, special player.
And again, we've obviously known this for anybody here locally covering this program every single day, but the word is getting out. I mean, people around the country are talking about him. I said it the other day, probably the best true freshman in the country as of right now. And there's a lot of football being played and a lot of good freshmen out there, but I struggle to find somebody that's doing more than what Dylan Stewart's done in 2 weeks so far.
You know who the number 2 in the country is, Tyler, according to PFF pass rush grade?
Who's that?
That'd be Willis McGahee the 4th. How about that name, right? That's a blast. That makes me feel old again. From Nebraska, but he's only played 16 snaps.
Yeah.
So
smaller sample size.
Yeah, I mean, Dylan has played, like, you go back and look at the game and you're sitting there watching the game, you're going, man, Dylan's had a big impact. You finish the game, you go, man, he did have a big impact. He played 25 snaps in the game.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so.
And you knew every single one of them he was out there.
You knew all of them. Like, Kentucky felt they could go back and they felt every single one of them. So, yeah, he's been outstanding. To do it as a freshman, let me just reiterate, not normal.
No.
You know, I mean, I think this is, like, some people put too much on freshmen because, that guy's a 5-star. He should immediately be making plays. Yes, making plays for a lot of 5-stars, yes. We expected and said before the season, Dylan should be able to come in and make some plays based on his athleticism, his talent, what we heard spring, summer, preseason. This has gone above and beyond, I think, anybody's expectations. He just looked so advanced, and it's crazy to think about what he could be as a junior. This is number 1 NFL draft pick type of stuff, like potential in a couple years.
Terry, Jay, and myself talked about this yesterday at the end of the halftime show. I hope South Carolina has the resources to hold him around here for a while, because we all know that phone's probably ringing quite a bit. There are other notable campuses that are eyeballing him and putting together what resources they think they need to try and lure him away. He's going to be very sought after this offseason.
The good thing there, and that does happen.
Sure.
We've seen plenty of examples here and across college football. Nobody's immune to it these days. The good thing is that Stewart is a pretty grounded kid who, and I'm not saying, Dave might clip this and play it in a couple years if Dylan Stewart goes and plays for another team. But, he's not as much that type of guy where you still got to worry about it, because you always got to worry about it with anybody nowadays.
Sure.
But he is I just want to play ball type guy and has good people around him as well, to where I think it's a more stable situation for South Carolina. So he seems to like it here, has a great relationship with Sterling Lucas. He's obviously doing well. So I think you cross that bridge when you come to it, if it ever comes up.
Yeah, something you always got to be mindful of,
Yeah,
especially
things are good now.
Today's world, but certainly enjoying what we've seen 2 weeks into the season. And It's going to be a big test this weekend against a very good pass-blocking offensive line in LSU, which we'll spend plenty of time diving into tomorrow ahead of Saturday's big game. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Come back and wrap up today's show here on Tuesday on the Game. Welcome back in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler and Chris along with you for a few more minutes on your Tuesday here on the Game, kind of putting the final bow on Kentucky before we move on to LSU coming up tomorrow and the big matchup coming to town this upcoming weekend. This was obviously a very significant win. not only for this season, but for the Beamer era as a whole, as we are now in year number 4. When you think about where it ranks, again, I think it's easy to say Tennessee and Clemson in 2022 are 1 and 2. Is this one 3, top 5? Where does it fall for you?
I think, so I was going to say you need to wait till the end of the year to see. The reason I was going to say that is if this season turns out to be not as good as you want, then I think it loses its luster a little bit.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like if you had, like let's say you had another 5-7 season. Does it mean the same thing as if you go win 7 or 8 games? I don't know.
Sure.
Probably not. I think, like right off the top of my head, it's probably top 5, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just like the fun factor. Like it was tied early, but that ended up being a very fun game because you dominated them. The stadium cleaned out. KSR is doing a post-game show before the game's over.
A post-mortem.
Yeah. I mean, like, well, what are the ones you would name? You got Tennessee, Clemson. Those are obvious.
The Florida game in 21 gets brought up a lot.
The Auburn game in 21.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Kentucky last year at home, that was a tight game. That was a great atmosphere.
Sure.
So you're probably competing with Florida 21, Auburn 21. Some people may throw the Duke's Mayo Bowl in there.
Yeah. As far as expectations being low, considering the fact you didn't have a quarterback going to that game, you still found a way to win. That's back when bowls kind of meant a little something to a degree.
I would say it's like as fun as that atmosphere was last year for South Carolina, like to use the point that I just made, did the Kentucky game at home last year lose its luster a little bit because you went 5-7? Like you needed it to try to get to a bowl, but you didn't end up getting there because of how some other games in the season played out. This one is probably along the same lines for me as the 21 Florida or Auburn game because it was a road game. You needed it. Like you needed this game because of the season. You know, you need to right the ship this year from a win-loss standpoint. We all knew this was going to be a very important game for Kentucky and South Carolina. You came out the winner, and you did it in a pretty fun fashion because of how your defense played.
Nameless Texter also says the first A&M win, which would have been 2022.
Yes, I should have. Yeah, we had a similar conversation this a while back, kind of ranking or looking at some of those wins. But yeah, A&M that was a fun one. This is the first time you beat A&M. That should be in the conversation.
Norman says the Kentucky game with Darude still beats this last game, I think, from an environment standpoint.
Oh,
because you're at home, sure. I don't know. Something about beating a team that we've talked about is essentially your rival now, that you've routinely played in 7 to 3-point games more often than not. To beat them by 25, I don't know. That feels pretty good to me.
Well, let me give you another one. I mean, South Carolina has not been, as of late, very good on the road in conference play.
That was only the 3rd win of the Beamer era, 3-10.
So what are the other ones? You've got
the big Kentucky 2 years ago.
2 years ago.
I guess Vanderbilt in 22. Is that it?
Yeah.
As far as conference wins on the road?
I remember seeing that flash across the screen. It was something like 2 and 10.
It's 2-10 going in, now 3-10.
Right. So that's
it.
So that, that is meaningful as well, when you're thinking about, because that's one of those things where people go, you got to start playing better on the road. Well, a 31-6 win on the road, pretty good. Good, the appearance of progress there, I think. So, yeah, I think you could put it in the top 5. I don't know if I have a strong opinion either way. You might have it right outside the top 5. I think there's probably some inherent bias in there with the home factor.
Sure.
They've won more of the bigger games at home, number one. And then number 2, like the home environments, like the texter pointed out there, like the home environment is better when you're hanging out in Williams-Brice and you're winning a football game. It's better than a lot of times watching it on TV.
Right.
On a road game.
It's also significant. The first time Terry and I doing a watch party at O'Hara's could say we watched them win a game. They lost all than we did last year.
That move it up for
So
you?
I was a little worried.
Oh, y'all broke that streak?
We broke that streak.
Yeah.
It was a fun time at O'Hara's on Saturday. Like, the funnest wins are ones when you have a comfortable lead in the second half. You can just kind of like let it soak in, as opposed to like being on pins and needles for the final couple minutes. Like, yeah, we're watching the student section empty out at the beginning of the fourth quarter. Like, this feels pretty good.
Get all the shots of the one guy in the section.
The
Like,
one
he's
guy that
only
was
person-
left. Which,
he's
by
the
the
only
way,
person
I mean,
there.
they had their sunglasses on. They were ready to go. They were ready to rub it in if they won this game. Didn't give them a chance.
Nope. That was fun times.
Yeah. And again, now there was a bit of a tragic situation going on in Kentucky after the game that, certainly changed the mood of their post-game show a little bit. But when they actually got to talking about football, very, very somber for our KSR boys, who were very, very cocky going into the weekend. That'll do it for today's edition of the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs. Halftime show, myself and Terry Ford, coming up next on your Tuesday here in the game.